This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is June 11th, 2026.
I'm Scott Delunderbaum.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. As I was just saying to you before we hit record, I'm exhausted. I have been on video calls, internet calls, recordings all day. But I'm here to, run out my energy for this show for you, our loving audience.
Yeah, so the same. It's been a rough work week for me too. So this may not be the most articulate podcast we've ever done. But
They're
I'm
not
sure
paying us for it,
so...
They're not paying us for it, but you can at patreon.com/politicos. It is fun because every so often I or my wife meets someone who knows someone who's like, oh, I listen to Ian's podcast. I'm like, I forget sometimes we actually have a sizable audience. So thank you for that. We do try and keep up with things and enjoy it. Someone who's not enjoying things these days is probably David Eby, who will talk about why with his polling numbers. The centrists in the province think it's time for their resurgence. Carney is banning kids from social media, and I'm asking why not everyone. And the federal Greens remind us that they exist with a leadership race that's about to kick off. Let's get into it all. So let's start here in BC with polls on a podcast. We have numbers from actually quite a few firms recently. You put Leger and Research Co. in here, which are the two newest, I think. Neither of which is particularly good for the NDP. Oh, and I guess there's also the Angus Reid Premier Performance numbers.
Yeah, unfortunately, Angus Reid doesn't have a tracking number, so I can't just look consistently across all of them. But yeah, Research Co and Leger both had numbers out this week, and been a bit of a period between the last polling by a major firm and this set. So the questions we had about are these trends or are these outlier polls? We're starting to get a little more of a picture with things either tied up or the Conservatives pulling ahead for the first time in a while. I'm
looking back through 338. So for the new polls, Research Co. has them both at 42% and the Greens at 9%. Leger has the Conservatives at 45% to the NDP at 41%. Going back on 338, Angus Reid has a poll from late April with the Conservatives at 46 to the NDP 36. So that's actually the widest gap of anything going back to the election, I think. But Main Street and Leger had the NDP up by 4 or 5 points before that. Angus Reid had the NDP down by 2 in March. And you kind of go back and it's kind of bouncing around depending on which pollster you look. But it's not hard to find polls that have the Conservatives sometimes ahead. But it's not a trend for the NDP, and these are kind of the first numbers for the post-Carrie Lynn Findlay victory, where she didn't immediately tank the party. Now, most people still don't know who she is, according to these numbers, but...
Yeah, a lot of the Conservative vote seems to be driven by party ID more than leader, which, not unexpected. She has been around for a while, but hardly a household name as far as Canadian and BC politicians go. So, understandable. Didn't have as much of a media presence during the leadership campaign as some of the other leadership candidates. So, in that respect, there's definitely an introduction still needed. But on to the actual where the trends are. We're actually, for the first time, looking at 338 Canada. The projections have shifted. The rolling averages have the Conservatives, for the first time since a little bit before the last election, actually in the lead on both the averages and what a projected seat count would be. So going off their projections, vote was held today. It would be a Conservative majority with 54 seats to the NDP's 37.
Yeah, that's not good news for the Premier. Neither is, as I mentioned, the Angus Reid Premier popularity tracking poll, which has Eby down 6 points to an approval of 31%. That keeps him a full 10 points ahead of where Doug Ford is at. who's also probably at his worst personal performance, but the Ford government remains stubbornly popular among Ontarians, or is it more that the opposition remains slightly less popular than his party?
I mean, we could all be blessed with enemies as incompetent as Ford's have been. He's managed to luck out because I can't remember the last time he actually had a approval ranking above 50%. It has been years since that, and the Ontario polling is almost always Ford approval, 20%. Likely outcome if the vote was held today, PC majority.
Yeah, looking across the country, the only really popular premier is Wab Kinew, whose popularity has risen to 62%. Newfoundland's Wakeham, who I couldn't have named, he's up 8 points to 50%, and Scott Moe is down a point to 50%, and everyone else is kind of simmering below that. Even Danielle Smith dropped another 7 points, but she remains more popular than David Eby.
Yeah, by a good 10 points.
Yeah, for the controversies, he's had 8 points.
8 points.
Yeah, for all the controversies he's had, she has a base who supports her. It's not huge, and it's possibly shrinking, but it's unclear what base David Eby is appealing to of late.
Looking at the breakdown of people who voted for that party in the last election, Smith's sitting at a solid 72 to 26 approve, disapprove, where Eby's a lot closer at 57-41. And taking this with the kind of horse race polls we were just talking about, I think the takeaway on that isn't that the Conservatives, with a new leader, have suddenly shot ahead. It's more that Eby's pretty troubled spring has started to show up in the polls. I think that's the most parsimonious explanation for all of these ones together, and it would kind of track at least the general vibe one was getting in April of this year, as Eby was just flailing around, making absolutely no one happy.
Yeah. It's not a good position for him to be in. I saw someone ask somewhere, can a premier recover from a 31% approval rating? And if you scroll down this poll, Doug Ford's done it multiple times, most notably during the COVID pandemic in 2020, when he shot from 31% to 69%. All it takes is a mass public emergency to make whoever's in charge look, and you deal with it half competently, which I'm not going to give Doug Ford too much credit, because there was definitely a lot to criticize in Ontario's response, but he showed up and did the minimum, and that's all people were looking for, apparently. Now, he crashed pretty hard after that, but he's bounced back a number of times. He's like the Teflon man. I don't know how Teflon David Eby is.
Oh, I don't think David Eby's very Teflon at all. He has none of Ford's, folksy populist charms, and just cannot play into that game very well. It's also a little interesting that you look at David Eby's ones, and there's this peak around March 2025. The last one before that is December 24. So you could argue there's a slight boost from the rally around the flag effect following the troubles with the relationship with the US. But it was a pretty small one, and it did not hold very long. And I don't think Eby's going to be particularly able to kind of recapture that. And that, I think, is kind of the problem, is we got a smaller emergency than COVID, but still something that produced a significant rally around the flag effect in general, and Eby managed to squeak out a mere 7 points out of that pretty quickly dissipated. So I don't think you're going to get something again that's going to have that benefit for Eby, nor should we necessarily want that just for someone to help recover.
No, I'm not wishing for ill on this province. The other thing this makes a lot of people ask is, well, we don't like the NDP, and we look at this new leader of the Conservative Party and we go, we don't like that. And so there's a big group out there who's like, well, what if What if, Scott, imagine the BC Liberals would come back. Remember the good old days? And like Mark Carney's really popular and he's like a center-right liberal. What if we just did a Mark Carney in BC? And those meetings are happening by serious people.
Take issue with the big group on it. But there's definitely some people working to try and get that going. Now, this is, for clarity, different than the Center BC group that started up a couple years ago and has kind of just sat there doing not much and is, I believe, currently in a leadership race with no one actually expressed an interest in taking on the role that Karen Kirkpatrick had after she decided to step back for personal reasons.
She's still technically leader according to their website and any coverage they've gotten, but
yeah, she's staying on until there's a replacement. Not a lot of movement there. Interestingly, Research Code did ask this question, and while you did get 47% of British Columbians agreeing in general about it, only about 12 to 15% would actually vote for the BC Liberals if they were to stage a comeback. And that's before we get to the challenge of how do you actually bring the BC Liberals back.
Yeah, the Research Co poll was really funny for that perspective, right? On the top line, they only have, I think it was like 3% said they would vote for Centre BC because no one knows who they are. For the record, they are having their AGM on June 20th. So if you are super keen to help be a part of that, go check out their website and join their AGM. Maybe you could be their next president or vice president. I think after that, they're going to start seeking candidates for a new leadership movement. But it's a slow process. And, parties take a lot of internal work. Research Co, for their part, also asked straight up, is it time to bring back the BC Liberals? And only 42% agreed to that. And then, like you said, when they put the BC Liberals on the ballot, 15% said they'd vote for them versus 35% for the NDP and 34% for the Conservatives. So they leech votes from both major parties, and the Greens kind of stay consistent at 9%. So
yeah, but what's rough for them is among 2025 federal Liberal voters, they're only bringing in 22% of that cohort, where the NDP are scooping up 38%.
Yeah, because most people, I think, see we have a first past the post system and realize there's no point in voting for a third party. And BC has a very long history of you are either the NDP or CCF or you're the other guys. And right now the other guy is the Conservatives. Now, hypothetical polls, I don't put a ton of weight in because, who's the leader of this? What does their campaign look like? What are they running on? What do they stand for? These things do matter in an actual campaign, but it is just very funny to see a large number of people say, hey, it would be great to have this thing, but then no one puts their money where their mouth is. Or, maybe it's all a whole bunch of NDP voters are like, yeah, bring back the BC Liberals, bring back a center-right alternative because they'll split the vote with the Conservatives and we'll win. Maybe it's cynicism drives those higher numbers there.
Could be. It also kind of reminds me of the phenomenon where people always lament the current federal Conservative leader and say things like, oh, why can't they just have someone like, insert the former leader that was moderately coded here, a Stanfield and O'Toole. And then when you ask them if they voted for them during those elections, the answer is almost always no. It's a lot easier to be for a party in theory as something that should occupy somewhere on the spectrum than it is to actually put your vote down on it.
But there are people trying to still resurrect the brand. The Globe and Mail has a report on this of some calls that have been happening recently, and they name a couple names of who was on the call and who are willing to speak out on this. This included former BC Liberal strategist Mark Marison, ex-husband to Christy Clark, and also, involved in a couple City of Vancouver mayorship campaigns. On the one hand, on the other hand, Andrew Weaver, former leader of the BC Greens, turned independent, turned curmudgeon of Oak Bay turned, I guess, desirer of a new liberal movement.
At least now. Andrew Weaver is interesting in that he has jumped around a lot. Before he was leader of the Green Party, he was definitely on the record as supporting the BC Liberals in one of their elections over the carbon tax. He, since leaving party politics, has at various points supported the Conservatives or said nice things about them and indicated that they were his preference at the moment. And of course, led the Green Party. So really it just kind of jumps around a bit.
He was a really big fan of John Horgan, too, don't forget.
Yeah. I think
on a personal level.
Yeah, in the election between John Horgan and Sonia Furstenau, I believe he supported the NDP in that one, which kind of makes me not take his participation in this super seriously. And just like on a more general note is kind of feel like the BC Liberal Party and that kind of center-ish, we're going to be focusing on fiscal prudency and like generally being like kind of socially progressive, but like not all that socially progressive at the same time, is not a spot on the political spectrum that has a lot of energy behind it right now. Like you look at where the major political fault lines are, and they don't run through the same spots that were the big ones when we were young, and even into our young adult years, where it was largely divided on economic issues, and now it's much more cultural. And really kind of bringing this kind of party back in this way feels like playing to a past that no longer exists and is kind of out of step with where the current fault lines are.
It's trying to capture the Mark Carney special sauce that is a result of very specific material conditions around, U.S. trade threats, Pierre Poilievre's incompetency, and just a perceived hyper competency in Mark Carney himself. And you could resurrect the BC Liberals having the same platform as him, but if you don't have the person who commands that level of respect, essentially, I can't see it working. It's just going to be boring. And there is a market for boring politics, especially if your alternative is Carrie Lynn Findlay. There's going to be a market for boring politics. But if you want boring politics, David Eby's your guy.
I mean, kind of. Like, there's definitely a cohort out there that doesn't like David Eby and would not necessarily be NDP voters. Problem is, that's not a huge cohort. And, just as I might wish that was kind of where politics still were, where there would be a viable party, doesn't actually make it true. And I can't see this being much more successful than Center BC was, other than the fact that Liberal is just a better brand, and, which definitely counts for something. And it's probably part of the reason why it's getting 15% rather than 3%. Nevertheless, 15% maybe squeezes out a seat or two, which I guess is a beachhead you can start building off of, presuming the votes are concentrated in the right areas. But it's not a sort of thing you can probably ride in this day and age into the Premier's office at all. And that's even before you get the challenge of how do you actually bring the Liberal brand back, because Elections BC rules are pretty clear on this, that you can't use a party name that is either currently in use or substantially similar enough to a currently in use party to cause confusion, or one that has been registered in the last 10 years. And BC United, that name change was all that long ago, and even in the lead up to the last election, they officially were going to be on the ballot as BC United bracket formerly the BC Liberal Party, which is so
funny. It's still so funny, Scott. We got to stop for a second and laugh.
Yeah, that's funny. And it extends the clock a little bit more on that. So you have to either, like, basically, the only way I can see this working is if you take over BC United and then change the name back, because that's still the same party. So you can just revert it, especially because it even had Liberal in the name on how it was appearing on the ballot last time. Easier said than done, although it's not as much of an organization there. It's probably easier to take over than it once was. They also floated another idea of using Liberal informally. Well, cited a bunch of lawyers to work on this, which seems much less likely for success.
It's not going to work.
Yeah, the rules seem pretty clear on that one. I don't think you can lawyer your way around that one.
So, like, the key is going to be trying to pull BC United from Kevin Falcon's cold car dealership hands, or whatever it is he's doing in North Van these days.
Wasn't it a car storage lot? Like, not even buying and selling, just storing?
Yeah. I was trying to look it up. I couldn't find it, but something with cars in North Van, which is just very funny to me still. So they have to find him, and that has been difficult for some journalists who have tried. They have to request he let it go, or they have to try and become members and like do a coup, like a legal one.
Basically like take over the executive and kind of
push
force things from there.
And all of this sounds painful and annoying and also doomed to fail because, as we pointed out, they're unlikely to generate a lot of success based on the fundamentals. But maybe, if it's good to have hobbies and passions, and I wish them well, because, if you have a dream of resurrecting a 25-year-old political project, go for it.
I would like there to be a party that would occupy this space. I would definitely be in with that 47%. I just have very low expectations of it as an actual political project.
Yeah, and hey, maybe David Eby could do them a solid and bring in proportional representation, and suddenly they'd have a viable path to do something with 15%, but he's ruled that out a couple times already, so no such luck coming for them.
Also, on that, with Eby's popularity shrinking a bit, or significantly even, doing it unilaterally rather than going through another referendum, which, definitely has its problems, would play as, rather than, bold leadership and to, bring BC up to where it should be. It would feel like a desperate attempt to hang on more than anything else. So that would just make it like politically much more difficult to pull off. Yeah,
he's not going to do it. I'll say there is one glimmer of hope in these polls for David Eby and the NDP, and that is where Research Co. asked, would you consider voting for any of these parties? And they listed the parties that exist right now. And the NDP have the highest ceiling, with 52% saying they would probably or definitely consider voting for the NDP, versus the Conservatives got 42% on the same question, which is the number they got in the poll. So the Conservatives are riding their ceiling, which is not a good place to be, because it suggests that they have found all of their supporters and they can't grow it from they could probably pull off a win to we are cruising to victory, versus the NDP just needs to convert some people back to grow. The Greens could also grow to 36% in this poll, which we'll see.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Malaysia. There's an 44% was their accessible vote for that. So yeah, they definitely have a challenge ahead of them, and they have probably gotten well past the point of diminishing returns on base mobilization and need to get out there and start doing the politics of conversion and convincing people to give them a look. And that
does not seem like Carrie Lynn Finley's strategy.
It's going to be tough. But yeah, politics of persuasion is 100% where they need to go. But that's easier said than done with that particularly vocal and active base among the Conservatives.
like it's worth pointing out that they recently named their chief of staff, and it was a kind of choice that drew some attention because people went, "Who? Who?" And the answer is activist Chris Delaney, who is not a young or fresh face. He's someone who was active in the HST fight 25 years ago. And if you go even further back, he was the leader once. He has political experience. He was the leader of the BC Unity Party, not BC United, BC Unity Party, which is something
they
I
ran
missed.
in 2021, right? So that was like 25 years ago. HST was close to 15, but still hardly like a recent bout of political experience on that one, or political notoriety.
Yeah, the not to be confused with BC United was Delaney's own letter to supporters. He describes himself as more than an acolyte of former Premier Bill Vander Zalm. BC Unity was an effort to amalgamate the fringe right-wing parties in 2001 and beyond, when they thought Gordon Campbell's Liberals weren't right-wing enough. So this was the then BC Conservatives, Reform BC, and a few other anti-choice groups.
Which is kind of hilarious, because if there was ever an election that gave the view of a province with political unity, it was the 2001 election, but all that unity was around the Liberals.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, he did, the HST effort was successful, so I won't say he has no idea what he's doing, but
I wouldn't say,
he apparently had a lot of struggle getting BC Unity together, and that whole effort resulted in him quitting, admitting that he failed to unite the far right.
It just on policy grounds. The HST referendum was a bad thing. HST is better than the PST-GST Mets, and it kind of sucks that that's how the province went.
Yeah, we don't need to relitigate it. It has been done many times in this province.
But yeah, definitely takeaway is, not a reach across the aisle pick.
No. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting times for BC politics, as it always is. That's probably enough for those sections. Let's talk about some of the announcements they made this week from the government. If you are a young person or you've never gotten your license, it's now going to be a little bit easier, as you can take your knowledge test online to get your learner's permit.
Cool. Apparently this is already done in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland. So, path has been charted on this, and the first thing I immediately thought of was, we don't exactly need to make it easier to drive and lower the standards there. And, do it at home test definitely feels like the sort of thing where that would be the end result, because it automatically turns into an open book thing. But they are actually putting in some test security on this one. So
your webcam, they're going to watch you with the webcam and also monitor your mouse movements. So hopefully you're not too ADHD that you're fidgeting, as I fidget wildly as I'm recording this. Hopefully your mouse isn't fidgeting all over and going back and forth, but you have to stay focused on your test, not looking at some book you have on your desk or an alternative tab. But it's been used for other things. You told me you've done a couple of these before, so maybe I'm just old and not used to online. I've
done an online
monitoring
exam where a similar process was used on it, and worked fine. A little weird, but made it feasible to do it remotely. So completely fine with this as a general process, and it was a decent enough experience.
And also, the knowledge test for learning to drive is
not hard.
It's 20 questions, and you aren't suddenly free to drive. You have to have a responsible adult with a full license beside you in the car.
Yeah, it gets you your
right.
L.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fine, whatever. It's a nothing test.
That's, yeah. And just like on the ADHD point, like if you can't focus long enough to answer 20 questions, you probably can't focus well enough to operate a motor vehicle. So I'm actually kind of fine with that one.
I just meant like my mouse is going to be twitching around so much it might look like I'm cheating when I'm not. But yeah, we'll see how this rolls out. Like you, I'm a little skeptical of making driving too easy, but also it's the learner's permit, fine, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, just as a general rule, I think we probably should be more stringent on our driver's licensing. And, well, this doesn't seem like it really moves things away from that. It doesn't move things towards it either. And in that sense, a little disappointed.
A lot of people have also been disappointed by the province's refusal or failure so far to follow through on its election pledge to end no pet rental clauses for tenants. This is the idea that, if you want to rent a place and you have a cat or a dog or other loved animal, your options are limited by many landlords who don't want pets in their houses. The NDP had promised to ban these, and nothing has happened since the election.
Yeah, I would almost say this isn't a case of refusal as so much as just complete disinterest on the NDP's part about actually doing anything about this.
Yeah, so David Eby was asked about this, and he said he is still committed to doing it. We don't have a timeline. He blamed the trade war stuff for distracting the government in the meantime, which, I mean, a lot is happening globally. But there's, if they can bring an online test for ICBC learners, they can look at this as well.
Yeah, I'll believe this when I see it, because it wasn't like the spring session was all that huge in terms of their legislative accomplishments. They could have definitely done more, and this is a minor enough thing. You can just stick it in a miscellaneous statutes amendment act.
I think there is some pushback from landlords as well, who are concerned about exactly how this gets implemented because they want to protect their property from pet damage. But
that's like a fair enough concern.
Like if you're going to put it in your platform pledge, then you need to follow, do the consultation at least publicly. And if you're walking away from it, do that then. Find the justification to walk away from it, kind of like they did with the tax cut they promised us all, that they went, we don't actually have any money for that, which everyone could see before the election, when everyone was running on a deficit and also running on giving away a bunch of money. But, I did dig up their platform and wondered what else is missing that hasn't been dealt with. The incredible, my favorite pledge of the election, the most micro-targeted one actually, was the free off-peak transit for seniors. I don't believe has come into play. You wouldn't know because it's so narrowly targeted. But I don't think it's been implemented yet. And that's another one that seems incredibly minor to do.
Potentially, but there's a question, at least on that one, of like, how do you fill in the lost revenue on that? So I can at least see the argument that takes a little bit of work. That said, it's like so micro-targeted. It's like a why are you even bothering kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. They also promised to modernize liquor laws and licensing, and the only thing I've seen from that is a couple weeks ago, they did announce that restaurants, pubs, and bars are now able to buy alcohol from private stores from May 29th until June 2029 in a temporary measure.
God forbid we actually make a permanent change to this. 9 years after the process started?
Yeah, the Business in Vancouver story is fantastic because it quotes then Attorney General David Eby from 2020 talking about how he was going to work on this and the consultations that had started several years prior to that. So this is a thing that came up when BCGEU was on strike and restaurants couldn't send their staff to buy liquor from the private liquor stores that were still open, but patrons were allowed to buy a bottle of wine and just pay the corkage fee to bring it in. And that left people going, does our system make sense? No. But, no government in this province has a good record on moving fast on liquor laws and improving them. There've been little bits here and there from everyone, but it is quite the field. Well, let's talk about a big move federally, as just before the House of Commons rose for the summer, I think they have now, they introduced Bill C-34, the new online harms bill, which most prominently now includes a ban on people under 16 from using social media unless the Online Harms Commission approves the platform as safe for kids.
That seems like a reasonable compromise from just like a flat out one to we are going to let some use go through, but it actually has to really be safe and not just a kind of, well, we'll take your word for it.
Yeah. I never really liked the all-out ban because it just felt like it was dealing with the wrong issue. If we all agree social media is harmful, it's harmful for people who are 14, who are 18, who are 40, who are 84 in different ways and are being targeted differently. But like that begs for regulation of the algorithms in some manner, but there's just like a lack of willingness to do that. The rest of this online harms bill is largely reflective, I believe, of the previous one the Liberals had introduced, and that one was starting to get better feedback from a lot of stakeholders, and people who looked at it had addressed a number of the overreach criticisms of previous versions. It's still tough legislation to implement, I think.
Yeah, look at the summary of the bill, because I've not had a chance to dig into the full thing, and sure there'll be a Michael Geist piece out soon, if not already, on it. But like, it doesn't look like it has any of the really controversial stuff in the previous ones, particularly around required content moderation stuff outside of specific harms, mostly related to sexual victimization and intimate images sharing.
Yeah.
So, like, on that front, I expect this one's going to be much less controversial. The 16 age cutoff is the big headline on this one, and I expect most people will end up nodding along with it.
There's a lot of support for it, too. Like, I don't want to downplay that.
Yeah.
The default assumption, I think, if you go out and ask people is like, if you ask someone on the street, should kids be banned on social media? They're going to say yes, because we all kind of hate it these days.
Yeah. I mean, social media has its problems. There's that old joke that, the Twitter meme of the fact that I'm potentially exposed to a 14-year-old's opinion on the world is a human rights violation. Like, it's the sort of thing that is going to get a lot of support, I think, in general. I haven't necessarily thought through all of the aspects, but like in general, I would say I'm leaning supportive on that. And it does follow steps Australia's made. Other countries are also looking into similar kinds of rules on this, so definitely seems to be where the trend is going.
Yeah, the other big fear about age restrictions is it requires social media companies to implement some way to find out what your age is, and that's either collecting identification from you, or the thing Australia has tried to do and has become a meme of ridiculous headlines is like video age verification software, which I saw it reported that people were very easy to fool. Some kids drew mustaches on, and that tricked the app in a couple cases at least. But this is all a learning process. People understandably don't want to give Facebook their ID because data protection has there are leaks. Things get leaked.
Yeah, at
and
this
it's
point,
one thing to lose your password, another to lose your driver's license or other ID.
Yeah, I think at this point we can pretty safely say that no internet-connected computer system is truly secure. You've had data breaches of private companies. You've had data breaches of governments. Like, if it's stored in a database, there's always a chance there will be a data leak on it. And yeah, people aren't going to be super happy about having their IDs compromised. especially if that ID was used in connection with age verification for accessing pornographic materials. So, like, it's going to be a controversial thing to figure out, and how they navigate that's definitely a choice, or definitely a challenge, because it doesn't seem like anyone's actually come out with a secure, reliable technical solution to this. And
so the bill itself does require that platforms don't collect personal information other than for age verification or estimation purposes, and that information collected for your age verification must be destroyed once the verification is complete, and it has to be secure and protected in the interim while they are verifying it, and then destroy it. So they are at least saying it should not be kept in a database,
which is
by law.
Yeah, better than some of these attempts have been. I think several U.S. states have passed age verification rules, and that's definitely been a challenge with that. So, good on them for at least recognizing that and putting in some rules around it. But we'll actually have to see what the implementation's like when this really gets rolled out.
Yeah, the other part that's super vague, though, is like, all right, we said some social media sites can put in place measures that allow them to be deemed safe for children. In this case, it is specifically regulations set by government that the commission that they're creating reviews and goes, yes, we are satisfied. The operator provides adequate safeguards in the regulated social media service for the protection of children. What does that mean? We don't know. We just don't know what a safe social media site for kids would be by this bill, or what the government thinks it will be. That's a future problem to solve.
Yeah, on the other hand, I can at least see this one as being a case where it's technical enough and is probably going to change as technology evolves, where you maybe don't want to be super prescriptive in the legislation itself and give more flexibilities to the regulators. And I'll at least give them this. The feds do seem to actually put more stuff directly into legislation than a lot of BC stuff, where like half the bills are just, and it shall be determined in regulation, or the minister shall have the ability to make regulations on it. So we haven't at least gone quite that far down that direction federally yet.
Yeah, I don't need it to be spelled out in the bill, but I would just love to see the corresponding regulation put with this, so we can at least have a sense of, okay, this is what you have in mind. And maybe it needs to be updated, but like right now, I don't know what they're thinking, because there's different versions of, child safe social media that could exist. There's a whole bunch, like, is it Sesame Street Facebook? Like, what are we talking about here? I just want to know so we can figure this out. But like, big parts of this bill, like the duty to act responsibly being put on social media, I think is a really positive thing, where, you have this commission that can review cases where social media is alleged to be not taking action on harmful content, and harmful content has definitions in here. So like, I'm not hard against this bill, and it's come a long way, to the government's credit, but there's still enough that I think this is a kind of thing that merits really fulsome debate through committee, through the Senate especially, where, the independence of the Senate, I think, has given it some authority to think in a less partisan lens about a lot of this. And I also appreciate the government introduced it now, so we have time to think about it all summer, consult on it, come back in the fall, and actually move forward. This is a bill that doesn't need to move super fast, I think. Like, these are big issues that should be dealt with, but let's not rush this too much, while also trying to get it passed soon, because it's been sitting around for, I don't know, we've needed this for a decade or more.
Yeah, which, means I'm sure the AI regulation will be coming sometime in the late 2030s, early 2040s.
Oh yeah, that's the other annoying thing. They're going to pass this bill, and then it's going to be 2 years before we actually get the regulation for what a child-safe social media site will be. So, fine, whatever. It is what it is. Other things that don't move fast are high-speed rail projects in this country.
Which is ironic, considering they really should be
Yeah.
going fast.
And now the Parti Québécois has said if they form government, they will withdraw Quebec from the Alto Rail project, to which I believe Minister Steve McKinnon said there is no Alto Rail project without Quebec. So, cool.
I get why he said that and not the other thing that is true, that or the thing that really is true legally, is that railways are about as like clear-cut this is solely federal as you can get in the Canadian system of federalism. Like, if the feds want to build a railway through Quebec, the feds can build a railway through Quebec. You don't actually need the Quebec government to be fully on board with it. That said, I get why they're not...
They pushed a pipeline through BC so they could do a railway through Quebec.
They absolutely could. I get why they're not saying it in the lead up to the Quebec election, but I sure hope that's actually what the plan is in Ottawa.
I'd be shocked if anything was going to get pushed through Quebec.
I don't know. If anyone's going to do it, it would be Carney. But
I say if they're not going to do a railway to Quebec City and Montreal, build it in the other direction. Build it from Ottawa to Vancouver. That might be a bit much. Build it from Calgary to Vancouver and then like fill it in. But start the plans to connect.
Phase 1 right now is the Ottawa, Montreal. Maybe send that one south instead to Toronto if Quebec doesn't necessarily want to play ball. And, the Montreal-Quebec City line is probably the least important part of the whole route, so, that one should get on the chopping block.
Daniel Smith pitched a plan where Alberta's going to put high-speed rail in the next, I think by 2050. She's supportive of rail.
Yeah,
Use that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be hilarious if the money that was going to build high-speed rail through Quebec ended up going to build a high-speed rail line in Alberta.
I wouldn't hate it. But it just goes from one separatist movement to another. But yeah, there is the politics in Quebec is you have the stretch of land the railway needs to go through goes through a number of essentially NIMBY homeowners who don't want to lose their land or are afraid that they might specifically be targeted for expropriation and compensation, to be clear. And therefore, there's this political dynamic where a lot of suburban voters are anxious about this project. And
it is more the
they're playing it up.
That tend to be opposed to this rather than the suburbanites. Is what I've seen.
Yeah.
There's a story out today about how both Ontario and Quebec farmers are trying to rally in opposition to the high-speed rail line, which, man, we're just like Europe in that, whenever the farmers get organized, it's always for the worst possible political cause.
I grew up on a farm. My family is all farmers, and I can't, disagree with you. No offense to them. Not naming, my family specifically as any particular problem, but just, yeah, I hope they still build the railway. One person who likes railways is Elizabeth May. She famously did one election campaign by rail. Didn't go great, but it was a great visual for her to try.
Well, much of the Dream Party likes railways in theory, not super fond of the actual work needing to be done to actually build the thing, or fits the approvals process to actually speed those up to get them through. So, I feel like you need to put an asterisk for the Dream Party on that one. But
the federal Greens are so far from power, especially right now, that asking for pragmatic political policies from them beyond just
pragmatism. I'm asking for them to actually make sense and have a coherent policy package that goes together. But either way, it's not going to be Elizabeth May's problem much longer.
Says you.
Yeah, well, just wait another couple of years until she's back again. But right now, she's on her way out and started the process to replace her has kicked off.
I want to rephrase it. I'm going to say the Green Party of Canada has started the process for its next leader. That does not necessarily exclude Elizabeth May from running and winning as the next leader. It could happen.
The once and future leader of the Green Party.
Yeah, I give it more than even odds right now that she wins this thing, even though she is not officially looking at this job right now. She is planning to stay on as MP, though, so good luck for whoever takes over. If you want to be the next leader of the Green Party of Canada, you have to apply by July 17th. They will announce the approved list on August 5th. The membership voting will happen November 2nd to 13 by ranked ballot, and the results will be on November 14th. The leadership is open officially to co-leadership options this time. The last time, there were basically two teams where they announced that whichever one of us wins will appoint the other as co-leader, and one of those was Elizabeth May and Jonathan Petinault, who disappeared after the last election when he didn't win his seat. So we'll see. Elizabeth may be on one of those co-leadership ballots. I don't have any insider knowledge. I just have a lot of cynicism about the federal Green Party these days. You must raise $15,000 and you must sign up 200 new members, including 20 young Greens, which I double checked is someone under 30, or at least 12 under 30. And your candidates must be proficient in both official languages, though if you are in a co-leadership model, you can meet that requirement jointly, and Indigenous candidates are exempt from the language requirements. So good luck. CBC reports that former MP Matthew Norris for the Greens from Kitchener, I believe, is considering a bid, but otherwise, I don't know anything particular about this one. The idea of having to sign people up explicitly is new. Typically, I see parties say you have to get signatures from members, and often you'd get new members for that, but this is explicitly you must build the party or bring people in rather than just convert the existing members.
Yeah, that's an interesting quirk to this one, but probably something that they could definitely use, because the Green Party has been shrinking for a while. We joked throughout the segment about how it's turned into the Elizabeth May Party, and will probably once again be the Elizabeth May Party, but under her leadership, the party has not grown particularly well, so having this as kind of an explicit part of it, I kind of like it for them.
It grew a lot in her first leadership from 2006 to not to 2019, but till like 2011. But yeah, then after that,
ever since she won the seat,
steadily downhill since. I don't know. I'll keep my eye on it. Maybe something interesting will come up in it. I hope so. I want good things for the Green Party, just for political dynamism. But like one of the questions floating out there is, with Avi Lewis in charge of the NDP, what is the point of the Green Party besides Elizabeth May? And that's the question they'll have to answer. And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicos is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.